Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, Carrie.
Sonia, what was your best bite this week?
Carrie, my best bite involves an ingredient that I think gets a bad rap. It was a mung bean curry.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to sell me on mung beans. I have to admit, I have mung beans in my pantry and I know that they're really healthy and I've made them before and I like them, but just the sound of them is not that appetizing to me.
Yeah, mung bean isn't the best sounding name. Maybe they need a rebrand.
Yes.
But
maybe we can help.
I've always liked them, especially at Indian restaurants and other places I've tried them. And in fact, one time my friend Esther made dinner for me and she made this incredible mung bean curry. And then I recreated it at home because I loved it so much. And so that made me start buying it more regularly. But I get why people are just put off by the name. But if you get over the name, they're a lot like lentils. They're pretty quick cooking for a legume. They're small, they're lentil sized, and they are really nutritious. And this recipe I discovered because of my friend and neighbor, Satya. She sent me this recipe. It's for a Kenyan mung bean curry. I guess it's a traditional dish of Kenya. I might be saying the name wrong. I think it's pronounced ndengu. And it is kind of similar to mung bean curries I've had before, but it was very easy to execute. It comes from this vegan recipe developer. He has a site that is all vegan recipes, and there's some really good ones there. And my friend who gave me this recipe, she's vegetarian, so she's always looking for kind of ways to incorporate legumes and vegan recipes.
I mean, I have to say I'm intrigued and I'm curious because I want to know what the flavor profile is because I do love a curry. Obviously, you and I share such a love of beans and I love being able to pull a bean out of my pantry that can cook very quickly. And I don't know that I've ever cooked any Kenyan food. So what flavors make this interesting?
I'll tell you everything in it, but it's going to be a lot of those familiar flavors, including curry powder. That is one of the ingredients. So mung beans, like lentils, you can cook them just after rinsing them. And the first part of this recipe is you want to actually cook the beans on their own until they're tender. And it takes about 25 minutes. I actually soaked mine. I like soaking even lentils sometimes. I think I read somewhere that's better for digestion. So it's partly why I do it, but you absolutely don't need to do it. And that's why it's kind of a pretty fast recipe. And I made this on a weeknight. And so while the mung beans are simmering and getting tender, you can start building your sauce. So you finely dice tomatoes and you finely chop cilantro stems, which I love when a bean recipe has cilantro.
I love that. I love using my cilantro stems. I feel like it's such an extra win.
Yeah. So you have the leaves and you're going to garnish with the leaves, but for the sauce, you're going to use the stems. You get a deep skillet out, you heat it over medium, you add some oil and you saute some onion and garlic and ginger. Then you add the tomatoes, you add some tomato paste, and you cook that and you let the tomatoes start softening and forming the sauce. While the tomatoes are simmering, you finally dice some bell pepper and carrot. You know how much we love a bell pepper.
Yeah, these are all flavors that I think we all have mostly on hand.
No, it's really straightforward ingredients. Then you stir in some curry powder. It doesn't specify a specific kind, so you can use what you have on hand: cumin, black pepper, and turmeric. And then you add your cooked mung beans, because at this point your mung beans are tender while you've been building the sauce, which I also love the way it's sort of written out. While you're doing this, do that. While that's happening, do this. And it makes it all flow really easily. And then you add a can of coconut milk, just regular old coconut milk.
Absolute win.
Right.
Yes.
So then you simmer that. It's simmering for 15 more minutes just to let all the vegetables soften, for the flavors to come together. And It's so good, and then you just garnish it with your fresh cilantro, and if you don't like cilantro, skip it. You could garnish even with mint, I think would be nicer, or garnish with nothing at all. Or, this would be good with like a crispy shallot on top.
Yeah.
Some raita. If you're not vegan, I love the idea of raita or even just a little bit of plain yogurt just to give that tanginess to the
Tanginess,
coconut
yeah.
curry. It was so good. And we ate it for several days. Like it made a big batch. And to have even like a quick lunch where you just reheat some really good curry, you have some leftover rice, that's like a perfect meal for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I love everything about this. It feels very doable. I love having a bean that cooks quickly. I said that before, but I think what also makes it feel a little bit more special is something rich like coconut milk.
I do think a mung bean has, even though I've likened them to lentils, it has its own flavor. It's very subtle. It's not an overpowering flavor. And it also has its own texture. Like it really holds its shape, unlike
Yeah.
a red lentil, which would taste delicious with all these ingredients, but a red lentil would break down into almost sauciness. This
Yes.
is like individual little beans that keep their round shape, which I think if you're a texture person, it might be worth trying a mung bean.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Years ago, I took an Indian cooking class from this woman. She grew up in India and her grandmother taught her how to do all this cooking. And one of the things she made a point to tell us is that Indians like their dal to be so thin. Like you don't want to taste any of that texture. And so I tend to make my dal when I cook lentils, I make them so soupy and soft, but I am a texture person. So
Mm.
to have a curry like this that has a little bit of a bite.
I love discovering this recipe. I'm definitely gonna be making it again. And I do think it's the little things like the bell pepper that makes it a little different from other recipes I've tried.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. If you're talking about onions, garlic, ginger, a little bit of tomato paste, I mean, what's really setting it apart? But if you're adding coconut milk, you're adding the bell peppers, that's adding a flavor that you and I both are really have kind I think at least I have, I won't speak for you, have really discovered through our conversations how much adding bell pepper into a soup or a stew or a curry really adds flavor that I did not expect before.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Well, Carrie, what was your best bite of the week?
Sonia, I'm so excited to share with you. I made chocolate amaretti this week. The reason I made chocolate amaretti is because it is that time of the year when my neighbor's lemon tree, which extends over our fence, is just like giving us so many lemons. Lemon
Oh,
curd
what a
pick.
hardship to
I
have your
know.
a lemon tree over your. No, I'm
I
teasing you
know. No,
because
they
I've
ask
been
us though to take the
I know
lemons.
I've been there when the lemon tree is overflowing. It's just so beautiful, that lemon tree. It's such a blessing to have that sneaking into your yard.
It really is, especially for this Midwestern girl. You know, this time of year, it's
Yeah.
still frozen in the Midwest. And I just look out my window and it's just like golden lemons hanging over the fence. And so I've really been trying to use them. And I've been making lemon curd. And what I realized when I started making lemon curd is that lemon curd uses a lot of egg yolks, but it doesn't use the whites. I hate to waste anything. And so when I'm separating them and making this recipe, I'm just have these jars that accumulate of egg whites. I'm also someone who doesn't love egg white omelets,
Well,
you
they're a
know.
little like rubbery and flavorless if they're
Yeah, they're
not done really
flavorless. I
well.
like the
Yeah.
richness of the
Yeah.
yolk. And so I feel this burden of egg whites in my fridge. I think it was a Best Bite. Maybe sometime last year, someone had given you these amaretti cookies.
Yes.
It was an ottolenghi recipe. I've made that recipe many, many times, and I've shared it with a lot of friends. I have a couple of friends who are gluten-free, and it's a naturally gluten-free recipe because what you're really doing is just mixing egg whites that have been beaten to almost to like a meringue, and you're mixing them in with some almond flour, some sugar, maybe a little lemon zest. That's what I think the ottolenghi recipe has. In this case, it's almond flour, sugar, and cocoa powder. And then you mix in a little bit of almond extract and vanilla extract. They turned out beautifully in their chocolatiness. The ottolenghi recipe, I don't know if it's he calls for it or if I just added amaretto to it, but I like that boozy flavor.
I do think it's in there because I remember the taste of them. So a friend gave them to me last April
Yes.
because of Passover. And at
Right.
Passover, you don't eat any grains except for matzah. And so these are naturally grain-free, gluten-free cookies. And they have that incredible chewy texture that you
Yes.
get kind of from a meringue, but it's not a meringue because although it uses all those egg whites, it also has that almond flour mixed in, right?
Yeah, it is a chewy softness, and they're really pretty because of the egg. They sort of blow up a little bit. They're like crackly. They're like sort of crinkled and crackly, and you're rolling each of the cookies in a little bit of powdered sugar. There's something about them that feels really fancy and beautiful. They look harder to make than they actually are. What makes it so easy is I have a kitchen scale. I think that's something, I know you have one too. I think that's really something most home cooks need. I put a bowl on my kitchen scale. I measure out how much almond flour is. I dump in the sugar. Then you add the cocoa powder. And then separately in your standing mixer, or you can even beat your egg whites with a fork or with a whisk, but you add your vanilla paste and your almond extract to your egg whites and you beat them until they're foamy. I kind of like to get them almost to stiff peaks. I like to
So not
go,
just, it says foamy, but you go further, or
I
does it
go a
tell
little
you to go? Okay.
I like to go a little further. I think the ottolenghi recipe kind of has you go to softer peaks, and so I really like to get that texture in, and then you just combine the two. And I have one of those really small ice cream scoops. It's like a 1 inch, I think. I just like scoop out the dough. Because I had 6 egg whites, I ended up making a double batch, so I had like 50 cookies. And then you just roll them between your palms so that they're a little dough ball, and roll them in some powdered sugar, and then I just put like a thumbprint in the middle of each of them. It called for adding a blanched almond, and I felt like that was
Yes.
a little fussy for me.
Really? But it's
Yeah.
cute. I think you could do a regular almond. I don't think it has to be blanched.
Well,
I've seen them with almonds.
I had
Yeah.
some slivered almonds and I sort of like put them on there
Oh,
and
that's
called it a
nice.
day. I just didn't
Yeah.
want this crunchy big piece of almond. I wanted it to be a
Okay.
little bit more delicate. Again, I think because I came to this cookie from the ottolenghi recipe, and he calls for the sliced almonds, that are really delicate.
Yeah, sliced, not slivered. It's such an important
Yes,
distinction. You're
yes.
talking about like the paper thin
Paper
slices.
thin,
I
yes.
love that on a cookie. I think that's an interesting note. So if you're more of a whole almond person, you could do that. But if you don't want that crunch, which it really has,
Right.
having a delicate almond would still make it look attractive without that texture.
Yeah, I prefer the chewiness. I'm pretty particular about this.
Well, actually, it's a good reminder. I haven't made these cookies. I think I made amaretti cookies like years ago for Passover at some point, but I certainly haven't made them in years. I haven't made them since they were given to me. I do think people really love them, and they're so simple. And you could also drizzle melted chocolate on them. You could take this in all different directions.
That's a really good tip too, or even if you added mini chocolate chips to them. I wouldn't be mad at that either.
That would be so good.
Yeah, that would be so good. Yeah, I think my one suggestion is to add a little bit of real amaretto.
Well, until next time,
Until next time, bye.
bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.